So it's time to start talking about Unreal's Player Controller. In this video, we'll talk about the fact we've used, well, I'm talking about it now, the fact we've used getOwner to search bottom up. Basically, we've gone from a component to the door, for example. The open door has gone up and looked above it and said, well, I'm part of a door. Now let's use getWorld to search top down. Let's start at the game world and go down to what we need. We're going to see that as game mode specifies the default pawn class. Why does this thing called default pawn even appear when we start? That's specified in the game mode. We're not going to play with that particularly. But you do need to know that the default pawn is your body, basically. We're using a default pawn as the body, and it's transient. The body might disappear while the game's playing. But there's a player controller when you start playing the game, another one of these temporary actors. And that's your mind, and that will persist even if your body disappears. This all sounds very metaphysical right now. And the player controller class has a method called getPawn. So the way that we're going to get to the pawn we're looking for is we're going to get world, we're going to find the player controller, then we're going to get pawn on that. By the end of it, you'll be able to just walk over that pressure pad and open the doors without having to stop and eject yourself and all that rubbish that we did in order to see the nuts and bolts. So I'll see you in there. Okay, so how are we going to make this happen? We've got our pressure plate area here. The challenge we have, of course, is that the player, well, the default pawn here, is only instantiated when we start playing the game. If we eject, then we're kind of taking the mind out of the body, if you like. The pawn here is the body, and now our mind is drifting around, observing ourselves from the outside, which is kind of fun. The challenge is, of course, we need the code to be able to find this thing in the scene. How do we do that? So let's break it down. The first thing is, if you go to Settings and Project Settings, you'll find under Maps and Modes that we have something here called the default game mode. It's set itself to Building Escape Game, just game mode, because that's what we called our project, Building Escape. And it's got things here, default pawn class, etc. They're not directly editable. We won't worry about editing them right now. But the reason that the thing that instantiates when we play the game is called default pawn, the body that appears for us, is because that's what we've got set as the pawn class. So we play, the game goes, okay, let's make ourselves a default pawn. There's also a default player controller going on in here. Now, it's not listed as a, well, it is actually, here it is, player controller 3. All right, so the player controller is the mind and the pawn is the body, but it's the body that we want to interact with this volume. So we need to go find the body. How do we do that? How do we find the pawn at runtime? All right, so up to now, we have been finding things by going upwards. By a bottom-up search. By that I mean if we click on a door and then we look at the component that we put on, the open door component, we have been searching upwards saying, what's my owner, what's the door, by saying get owner. Well, now we're going to search down from the world as a whole. We're going to find from the world the player controller, which only comes into action once the game is playing. We have the player controller, and from the player controller we can say, what is the pawn that I am controlling? Remember that as we eject, think of the pawn as the body and the player controller as the mind. So let's go look at how we do that over in the code. So I'm going to open up our code here. And it's a relatively simple job we've got here, actually, in a way. The difficulty is knowing what you would type. How would you know what to do? So let's recap what OpenDoor is doing. At the moment, we are in begin play not doing anything anymore. And we have exposed, of course, the actor that opens as an editable property over in the blueprints. Well, I'm actually going to take off the uProperty now so that it is no longer in the inspector. I'm not going to compile, but if I'd have compiled, this actor that opens would disappear. We're taking that functionality away for the moment. We can always add it back if we want to later, just so that we're very clear on how actor that opens is getting set. Go to the C++ file. What we need to do in begin play, so play has actually begun, so the player controller exists, is we need to start finding the player controller. This is how we do it. We go get world. It's a method, and we need the arrow operator. You'll see why in a second. Let's just let the Visual Studio catch up with itself here. If we go get world, and if we hover over get world, of course, what does it return us? Well, it's going to turn us a pointer to a world. Because it's a pointer, uWorld star there. In the pop-up, we know that we need an arrow operator. What do you get from there? Well, you could start looking for pawn, or you could start looking for get pawn, for example. You won't find it. Okay, you're going to get the number of pawns and some pawn iterator, but what you can get from directly from the world is you can get the player controller, specifically the first player controller. Look what it returns. It returns a player controller, or pointer to one. And it returns the first player controller, or null if there isn't one. Well, there will be a player controller. That automatically comes into your game. The player controller is the link between the pawn and the intentions of the person, of the gamer using the machine. It's the mind, if you like. So we are going to get the first player controller that exists, in this case the only player controller, and from there we can directly get the path. We can directly get the pawn in question. Now what does that return? It returns a pointer to a pawn. Is that okay? Is it okay to try and store a pointer to a pawn in actor that opens, which is a pointer to an actor? Well, it is, because pawn inherits from actor. A pawn is a, remember we talked about is a and has a relationships? A pawn is a actor. If we go over to Unreal, we have a look at Window, Developer Tools, Class Viewer, and we remind ourselves that we go from actor down into pawn. So a pawn is a actor. Because a pawn is a actor, it's perfectly valid here to send a pawn, which is the result of this long statement here, into an actor. Okay, so that should find the actor that opens for us. Let's try it. Let's build the game and see how we do. What do we do while it compiles? We go skibbity-beep-biddy, skibbity-beep-bidoo, or something. What I tend to do is look down the bottom right here and just see how the output's going and kind of cross my fingers that nothing's going to fail. So just before you hit play, I want to make you aware of something. If you've at some point selected that simulated button you can see there, you see to the right of play there's a little drop-down arrow. And then you've got a few different modes of play. We want to be in selected viewport mode, not in simulate mode. If you're in simulate mode, you won't actually possess the default pawn, and therefore what we're about to do won't work properly. So just be aware of which play mode you're in. If you've got a cog behind your play button, you need to just click the arrow to the right of it and then select there where I've done in yellow, selected viewport. Okay, so here we go. Let's play. Now, before I even test it, I'm going to eject immediately, take the mind out of the body. Let's have a look at the pawn. It's called default pawn 5. Now I'm going to look over at a door. I'm going to look at the open door, and of course I can no longer inspect it because I made the thing not visible. So let's just test, and then I might actually put a read-only inspectability back. Oh, it's opened that door. That's cool. So it is working. So I don't even need to actually make it a read-only property, that pawn, because we know that it's worked. We can see that it's worked there. But the other door doesn't work, and that's simply because it's not movable. If I make the door movable, it will work. Cool. So that's pretty good stuff, right? So what I want you to do now is to finish your pressure plates. You've got a whole process of pressure plates now. When you do adjust the size and position of your trigger volumes, link to the appropriate doors, ensure all doors are movable, and briefly test the gameplay. So go ahead, pause the video, and make use of this ability to use pressure plates right now. Welcome back. So thinking about the gameplay of my little bit of game here, I'm just going to let this evolve organically as we go. And I think I'm going to stick with what I've got here, actually, which is that I go over this pressure plate, the doors open, but when I try and get to them, they need to close. So one thing we're going to need to have is a delay. Okay, so it's all very well that they open. Escaping the room is rather too easy right now. So I think what we're going to deal with next is the ability to delay the closure of those doors and expose that delay to a designer so that a designer can say, you stand on the pressure plate, the doors open, but how quickly do they close? So we can end up in a really frustrating situation where they open, we think we're home free, but they close in our face. And then that can lead to various other things, like maybe later we move the chair over the pressure plate or something. Okay, so lots to be done, which is pretty cool. Let's just quickly recap how we've done this. We've said that in order to find the default pawn, we've gone to the world, we've gone top down. We've looked for the player controller that we know is there every time you play the game, and then we've gone and got the pawn from the first player controller that we find. Why would we ever have more than one? Well, it could be a multiplayer game. You may have, multiplayer game, basically. So that's all pretty cool. I'm just going to go over to my source control now and make a commit and maybe talk to you very briefly about an extra source control thing that we may not have covered. So I'm going to close both Unreal itself and the Visual Studio, making sure I save everything as I go. Look at my untitled changes. Now look, this .suo file is still here and it's kind of getting in the way and annoying me. Why is it here when I have already ignored it? You see, it's in my ignored.suo. The reason is once something is being tracked by source control, it will not go unless you remove it. Okay, so we need to actually stop tracking that. Very easy to do here in source tree. Right click and stop tracking will do the job. There is a way in the terminal for those terminal people as well. You could get rm star.suo, which is saying remove anything that is with the extension suo. It'll go through, find the suo, but tell me I need to use a force, so I could go up arrow to get that command back and go -F. And after all that, if we come back here and let it update, this suo is now being removed from source control as part of this commit, and these other files are being modified. So red means removed, This one, yellow, means modified, and then the green would mean a new file. So we haven't actually added anything. What we've done is made a couple of adjustments to the map. That is probably where we made those doors movable. And then we've added just the line that we talked about, and we've removed the ability to edit this thing in the details panel because we don't want to be confusing about who's in control of what actor can open the door. So that's it. Congratulations getting this far. We'll see you soon.